At 5:31 a.m. on Thursday, October 11th, 2012, Peter Chadwick called 911.
911 emergency?
Yeah, my wife's dead.
Okay, so where exactly is she?
What?
Where is she?
They took her.
That call led to a bizarre story and a series of events that would span 3 countries over the next 7 years. This is the case of the Millionaire fugitive. Good to see you. I'm Chris, and this is True Crime Recaps. The Chadwicks seemed like a happy, well-adjusted, normal family, and with those words, you know they were anything but. And Peter was a British-born investor who made his millions in California real estate. Qui Chu was his wife of 21 years. QC, as everyone called her, was a devoted stay-at-home mom to their 3 sons. Their family of 5 lived in a wealthy gated community in Newport Beach, the kind of place where residents pay big money to be protected from crime. From the outside, nothing seemed unusual about the Chadwicks, but get a little closer and the cracks start to show. And friends remember QC crying about her marriage. She complained that Peter wasn't affectionate anymore. She suspected he was frequenting escort services. She talked about divorce, but seemed resigned to stay with him for the sake of the kids. Her sons were her whole world, her whole life, until October 10th, 2012. On that afternoon, after school let out, the 2 youngest Chadwick boys were left standing alone at the bus stop. A neighbor noticed that QC hadn't picked up the kids. They were 9 and 12 at the time, which was odd for the devoted mom. She doted on her boys. Their house was filled with activity schedules, motivational messages, and loving notes to them. She wasn't the kind of mom who forgot to pick up the kids. And apparently, she wasn't answering their calls either. So, their neighbor gave them a ride home, but no one was there to open the door and the kids didn't have a key. They'd never needed one before. The situation was getting stranger and stranger. So, not knowing what else to do, the neighbor lady left a note on the door and took the boys home with her to wait for their mom and dad. But nobody came. When 7 o'clock rolled around with no sign of them, she called the police. When they got into the house, it was obvious something was wrong. Plates and food were still on the kitchen counter like someone had left in a hurry. The office safe was open and empty, and in the master bathroom, the scene turned even more grim. A glass vase was broken on the edge of the tub, and on the bathroom wall were very faint drops of blood. In QC's closet, detectives found something even stranger. She was keeping a running list of disturbing search items that she'd found on her husband's computer. So far, she had 35 phrases written under the words, "From Pete's computer." On the list were phrases like, abortion cost in California, Chinese massage girls escort, Team Tijuana escort girls, and how to torture. Clearly, there was something very, very wrong going on behind Chadwick's closed doors. Surveillance footage caught their silver Lexus SUV leaving the community at 1:32 on the afternoon of the 10th. But the car didn't have a tracking device. Border Patrol was alerted to stop if it tried to cross into Mexico, but as of that night, there'd been no sign of it. Peter's phone was turned off. It had been since 4:30 that same afternoon, and QC's phone was no help either. It was still at the house in the master bathroom next to her wedding ring and wallet. Police processed the house, convinced it was a crime scene. But who was who? Was QC the victim? Was Peter? Were they both in danger? And then, 14 hours after the Lexus drove away, it popped up again at a gas station 100 miles south, within walking distance of the Mexican border. QC was nowhere to be found, and Peter had a wild story to tell.
911 emergency?
Yeah, my wife's dead.
Okay, so where exactly is she?
What?
Where is she?
They took her.
Who took her?
The guy broke into my house. He drove me here. He had a friend. They've gone in a pickup truck.
Okay, so your wife did that?
She's dead.
Did she die in the house and then they took her corpse?
Yeah, they killed her yesterday.
They killed her yesterday?
Yeah, we've been driving in Newport Beach.
He claimed he was overseeing a remodeling project at one of the properties he managed when a handyman asked if he needed any more workers. And Peter didn't need extra help on the job site, but he needed some painting done on the stairs at home, so he hired him and gave him a ride back to his house on the afternoon of October 10th. And he claims that while he was working in his home office, he heard QC scream upstairs in the master bathroom. When he ran in, he saw her in the bathtub, the handyman standing over her with his hands around her throat. From here, Peter's story changed early and often. In one version, he claimed he tried to pull the man off her, but he was overpowered. In another version, he says he wanted to give her CPR, but the man sat on his chest and forced him to watch her take her last breaths. When she was gone, this strange handyman forced Peter to do the strangest things. And here, too, the story went in a few different directions. One plot twist had Peter forced to undress his wife's body. When he took a swing at him, the man squeezed his testicles until he obeyed. In another version, he was forced at knife point to pack a suitcase for himself. And he remembered the knife down to the smallest detail. He said it was a small Swiss Army knife. The blade was about 2 inches, and according to him, it was dull. But he couldn't remember much about the handyman. He thought his name was Juan, and all he knew was that he was Hispanic and in his 30s or 40s. Peter claimed that Juan forced him to open the safe and give him $10,000 in cash and jewelry. Then he was told to wrap QC's body in the green comforter from their bed and put her in the back seat of the family's Lexus. His suitcase was thrown in next to her, and Peter was forced in the driver's seat with Juan's dull knife pressed to his neck. For the next 12 hours, Peter said he drove around aimlessly at Juan's request. Then his captor called another man to arrange a meetup at the gas station near the border. He couldn't understand much because Juan and his accomplice were speaking Spanish, but he claimed he could make out the name Chi. And he couldn't provide too many other details about Chi, but he knew what he was driving, a green Chevy truck with a camper shell. He remembered because that was the vehicle that drove away with Juan and his wife's body. The plan was that they would let him know where he could find her once they had made their escape. He was told to wait in the SUV for Juan's call, but once the truck was out of sight, he said he went into the gas station and made the 911 call you heard earlier. The police got there within minutes, and his story fell apart pretty fast, especially when they got a look at the scratches and bite marks on his body. The fact was, no one actually saw the mysterious Juan. Not the other co-workers on the job site, not the guard at the entrance to the Chadwick's gated community, none of the employees at the gas station where Peter called 911. No one. And as if that wasn't suspicious enough, it was hard to understand why Juan would have told him to pack a suitcase with clothes and toiletries. It was even harder to come up with a logical reason why he and his accomplice would have taken her body with them. In fact, they figured the entire story was hogwash from beginning to end. And 5 hours after he made that 911 call, Peter was arrested. 6 days later, QC's body was found in a dumpster at a remote property outside of San Diego. She'd been strangled. Sometimes, when it comes to closing cases, there has to be a little bit of luck involved, and in this case, luck definitely played a big part. You see, her body wasn't supposed to still be there. If events had unfolded like they were supposed to, the dumpster would have been emptied and on its way to the landfill on the same day and time Peter was being questioned by the police. But it wasn't. And the only reason why it was left alone is because the homeowners were in the middle of a dispute with the waste management company and they hadn't paid their bill. So there it sat for almost another week before she was discovered. And you won't believe this next part. QC wasn't the first person to be left in that dumpster. Another body was found there a year before. In that case, like this one, the property owners were completely innocent. But what are the chances of finding 2 bodies in the same place? But back to Peter. He pleaded not guilty and fought for bail, and he got it, even though he was literally planning to flee the country if his packed suitcase was any indication. But for 2 years, he played it straight. He showed up for scheduled visitations with his sons, he appeared at all his court dates, and he checked in regularly from his father's house in Santa Barbara, 3 hours away. He was behaving like a model defendant, but secretly, he was plotting his escape. He was taking trips to find out if they were tracking him. With every trip, he went farther and stayed away longer, but he never left the country, not until January 2015. That month, for the first time, he didn't show up for a court date. When they searched his father's house, they found some big red flags. He had books with titles like How to Change Your Identity, How to Live on the Run Successfully, and Surviving in Mexico. And he'd cleaned out his bank accounts and taken cash advances on his credit cards. Peter had vanished. The hunt for him covered the United States, Canada, and Mexico, but they admitted he had the money to hide anywhere in the world. The U.S. Marshals added him to their list of their 15 most wanted criminals, but every time they thought they'd picked up his trail, they came up empty. He stayed off the grid for 4 years, and the public attention around his case was losing steam. That's when the Newport Beach Police Department had an unusual idea. To generate new leads, they started a true crime podcast about the case and his disappearance. As they said, technology can make the world a very small place with very few places to hide. The podcast was called Countdown to Capture, and every episode encouraged listeners to report any information they might have on the Millionaire fugitive. Less than a year after they dropped the first episode, they got a tip. Peter was in Puebla, Mexico, posing as a spy, complete with a fake badge he copied from the Marvel TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. When he first got in country, he was living large, staying at fancy resorts and going through his money fast. When people started asking questions, he moved on. But in the end, he didn't switch it up fast enough. In August 2019, he came back into the U.S. in handcuffs. He was charged with his wife's murder again, and this time, bail was a no-go. As of now, he's still in jail waiting for trial. So, what do you think of Peter's story about a killer handyman? Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. If you like getting all the crime in half the time, please don't go away before you give this a like, hit subscribe, and the bell so you never miss a recap. Until next time, take care.